The 18-month acting program at the Maggie Flanigan Studio prepares professional actors for enduring acting careers. In this interview, Allison McHugh talks about how the Meisner Training has helped her to get past emotional blocks.
Yeah, before I started the 18-month program, I had truly no idea what it meant to train as an actor. I've taken comedy classes, I did all the Upright Citizens Brigade training, I've done a couple one-off like, oh, this casting director is teaching an intensive. I've always wanted to act, and then I never really truly had the courage to like say it out loud until the pandemic. And once I finally got that courage and I was doing these, one-off casting director kind of intensive classes, I just realized how much I was missing, like the fundamentals of acting. I've been on stage before, I do comedy, but there's so much more. And so I really learned in doing those like short 4-week courses that I had no idea what I was doing. Mm-hmm. So I knew I was missing a really big chunk. I just didn't know like how much I was missing. Now that I'm halfway through the program, I truly realized that I had no idea how freaking hard it is to the levels of like vulnerability you have to get to. In first year, you just like break down all of these barriers, I guess is the word. It's like all of these emotional blocks that we've like learned throughout our entire lives, which I didn't even know I had. And then in the first couple months of first year, Karen would bring up like certain just ways that our body like would tense and all these kind of things. And I was just like, oh, they're things I've done my whole life, and I didn't realize that I had been doing them until you have to like start unlearning those things. So there's just so much that goes into it emotionally and physically that when you're in it, you start to understand it, but before that, it's just truly have no idea. So this is the first time working with Meisner. I had, when I was looking into classes, I had gone to a couple like one-off places that I had talked about, and they had talked about certain techniques. I had friends who I met through UCB that had talked about certain techniques, and I read a couple books, and Meisner was the one that kind of stuck out to me the most, and I maybe understood, without understanding it at all, understood it the most. I think the emotional preparation is the most wild journey. Like, it's so crazy that your brain, you're just like, goes so many different places. And I have this weird like tendency, I go back in time and then I like imagine things differently than how they actually happen. So it's like a mix of reality and fantasy. I have really truly no idea what my brain is doing when it's doing it. But it's crazy. A lot of my emotional prep in first year for my scenes was devastation. And I do comedy, and I've always been like a really lighthearted person, and I try to laugh everything off. And in prepping for devastation, I had to like dig and really hurt my own feelings, which was hard to do. But also when you just like have an emotional release like that, it was so cathartic. It was things that like I didn't even know. Like I had said how like Karen was teaching us about how our body tenses in different ways, and like I would always get the knot in my throat when I'm about to cry. Mm-hmm. And even if it's not, I would be like, why do I have this knot in my throat? I feel like I don't need to cry. But it was like my body teaching me to shove down my feelings. And so when I started unlearning how to do that and just like letting it go, it was like an amazing cathartic experience. Mm. Being able to do first year online, started this whole journey for me. Like if I hadn't have been able to do that, I don't know if I would have picked up these classes in person later. So being able to like have the flexibility of like, hey, let's start and work this into your schedule was really helpful. And then I also think it gave me a really good understanding of like, okay, you have some fundamentals, now really put them to work, get in the studio and like be next to people and be in the same space as them. it is night and day being in the classroom. And I'm so thankful that I can be in the classroom now, because I feel like I learned a good amount in first year, but it's so much different second year. It's so much harder, but it's honestly the first like real challenge that I think I've had like in any of my learning life, which is really hard but very rewarding. There's only 4 people from my first year section, including me, in person this year, because we had a ton of like LA, Austin, which was amazing. So first year there were people from all over the country. The first day of second year, we were like, ooh, we're outnumbered. Like there's a large portion of this class that already knows each other. We're the underdogs. And then by the end of the first class, like that was completely broken down. We're all in the same boat, you know, and we get emotional in there and we break down, and everyone is so good about it. It feels like, oh, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, like what happens in there stays in there. But then you come out here and you get, like, everyone gives each other hugs. It's just like a really positive group of people. When I met with Charlie, I was like getting emotional talking to him because I just couldn't even get the words out that I like wanted to be an actor. I grew up in North Carolina, and that's just like not a thing there. I mean, it is, but it's just not. And I've lived in the city for like, at that time, 3.5 years, and I'd done comedy, and I knew I could do that. But for me, there was just such a, oh, you do comedy or you're an actress. Like they feel so different, and some people look at them the same, but I just like could not cross over into that thinking. Even in doing first year, it was like people would just, in talking to them at a theater, I'm like, oh, come to my show, like all this stuff. And they're like, oh, she's an actress. And I'm like, oh no, I do comedy. And they're like, you're an actress. And like in doing this, I'm like, this is full blown, not like, I have to continue to allow myself to believe, like I still believe I have like a bit of imposter syndrome. I'm like, I'm doing the work, but I'm like chipping away at the fact that like I've built up in my head, oh, this can't happen, this can't happen, this can't happen. I'm like, no, I'm here all the time. I'm putting in the work, I'm doing the homework. I am trying my hardest to make a career out of this. That's being an actor. So it really is a full mindset shift, because if you had asked me that a year ago, I probably would have cried and said, I'm not an actress. But I'm been able to, like, in doing the work, I'm doing it. So own it. Charlie he's so hard on us, but in the absolute best way. Like, I know what he's saying is so right. He'll give an example of like what we're supposed to be doing, and we all are just like, oh, because we are hopefully one very long, far day off. We'll be on the same playing field of like, we see the things the way he sees them. Even in the harshest like critic, like when you get hard feedback, I trust it. And I know it's coming from a place of like, he wants me to genuinely get better, or he would not be putting in the time and effort to even give me this feedback. So I also think it's just, I have been a sensitive person my whole life, and learning to take feedback from him is going to be so helpful, and already has been very helpful. Just freaking do it, because I told my sister last fall, I was like, if I don't do it this time, punch me in the throat. Like, I've talked about it so much, and I've built it up in my head that it's like, never gonna go anywhere, but then you just don't stop thinking about it. So it's like, why don't you try, you know, and then see where it goes? Because where I am now is so different from where I was a year ago, and my whole mindset is different on it. But I was just so afraid to try. The money is worth it. It's something that I have to think every month, like, whew, but you know what? This is the best money I'm spending. I'm spending it on what I really want to do. I switched my job so I could have the flexibility to do this. After 4 years of thinking on it, you know, it's just like, it's time. Do it, make it happen, because all you're gonna do in 3 years, wanna do it again then. So if you keep putting it off and putting it off, you're gonna do it eventually. I love that I had Karen in first year and I have Charlie now. They're so different. And I loved when Charlie would come to our first year classes because it would be so interesting to see how he worded the same things that Karen was telling us. And for some people, it was like, oh, I get it. It was just having two perspectives, but saying the same things in different ways was so helpful.
Learn more about the Maggie Flanigan Studio by visiting the studio website. Actors who are interested in interviewing for acceptance into the studio acting programs should apply online and call the studio at 917-789-1599 with enrollment questions.